On behalf of the Federal Chancellor-Willy-Brandt Foundation, I would like to welcome you very warmly to this brief introduction to our international traveling exhibition on the life of Willy Brandt. Nazi opponent, German Chancellor, Nobel Peace Prize winner. You may ask yourself, is there anything else I should know about this man? Yes, a great deal, we think. The exhibition wants to show one thing above all. Willy Brandt, born in 1913 as a working-class child in Lübeck near the Baltic Sea, was a politician who, since his youth, was active internationally in the truest sense of the word, in mediating and connecting between nations and peoples. When we started this project, we asked ourselves the following questions. How can Willy Brandt's internationality best be illustrated? How can his fascinating biography be made accessible to a non-German audience? And how can his convictions be explained and his achievements acknowledged, as densely as possible and yet in as much detail as necessary? We decided to pick out 10 exemplary places and events from his political life for the period between 1933 and 1989. This resulted in 10 boards, each of which showing a city and date on the front side, as well as a photo and a matching quotation from Willy Brandt. On the back side, you will find objects and texts providing information about what determined his political thought and action during the respective period. The cities of Oslo and Stockholm stand for Brandt's years in exile from 1933 to 1945. From Norway and later from Sweden, he fiercely resisted the Nazi tyranny. The democratic socialist also found many political friends in Scandinavia. Norway became Brandt's second home. In 1940, he received Norwegian citizenship after Hitler Germany had expatriated him 2 years earlier. When Willy Brandt returned to Germany in ruins after liberation from the Nazi dictatorship in 1945, Berlin and Bonn became the key places for his political career. In post-war Berlin, controlled by the four victorious powers of the Second World War, Brandt's rise in the German Social Democratic Party, SPD, began. Here he experienced the division of the city, Germany, and Europe at first hand. As governing mayor of West Berlin, he was an important player in the Cold War. The East-West conflict reached a dramatic climax with the building of the wall in 1961. Willy Brandt contributed a great deal to the fact that the conflict between the United States and its allies on the one hand and the Soviet Union and its allies on the other gradually entered a phase of détente. The Social Democrat also played a decisive role in the reconstruction, safeguarding, and expansion of democracy in Germany, which was newly created in 1949 with the founding of the Federal Republic by the so-called Basic Law, our Constitution. In Bonn on the Rhine, Willy Brandt took over government responsibility in the West German state in 1966, first as foreign minister and then 3 years later as the first social democratic chancellor. Moreover, he was chairman of the SPD in the Bonn Republic for 23 years, longer than anyone before or after him. Warsaw and Strasbourg are cities where Willy Brandt's peace and European policy became particularly manifest. His kneeling before the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial in 1970 symbolized the Germans' confession of guilt and responsibility for the genocide of European Jews and for the war of extermination against the peoples of Eastern Europe between 1939 and 1945. This gesture and the recognition of the post-war borders created the first opportunity for the Federal Republic to draw closer to the Eastern European states and to set in motion the easing of tensions and the normalization of relations. This new Ostpolitik did not call into question the Federal Republic's firm transatlantic European anchoring in NATO and the European community. Rather, it built on this and complemented integration with the West. In the early 1970s, Willy Brandt played a decisive role in the first expansion and deepening of the EC, which was then still limited to Western Europe. This laid one of the foundations for today's European Union. The unification of Europe and the creation of a peace order for the entire continent have always been close to Brandt's heart. The cities of Geneva and Washington recall Willy Brandt's global commitment after his resignation as German Chancellor in 1974. In 1976, the Congress of the Socialist International, which met on Lake Geneva, elected him its president. Until shortly before his death in 1992, Brandt headed this worldwide association of social democratic parties. He stood up for peace, democracy, and human rights, and made the SI heard in world politics. In addition, from 1977 onwards, Brandt, as chairman of an independent commission for international development issues, worked to diffuse the escalating global North-South conflict. The so-called Brandt Report, which he presented to the World Bank in Washington in 1980, put forward numerous proposals for the elimination of hunger and poverty in the world and for a fair balance between industrialized and developing countries. Moscow and once again Berlin stand for the fundamental changes that occurred in the second half of the 1980s and ultimately led to the end of the East-West conflict. The disarmament of the superpowers' overflowing nuclear arsenals and the reforms that began in the Soviet Union in 1985 were welcomed and supported by Willy Brandt from the very beginning. A process was set in motion that released revolutionary forces in a Soviet-dominated Eastern Bloc. In Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany, oppositional civil rights movements had gradually developed since the mid-1970s. In 1989, they overthrew the communist dictatorships that had ruled their countries for more than 4 decades. The collapse of communism was sealed by the fall of the Berlin Wall. The way was now free for German unity, but also, so Willy Brandt hoped, for the peaceful coalescence of Europe and the self-determination of all its peoples. For him, this closed a circle. Peace, freedom, unity, and democracy were no longer dreams, but had largely become reality. The seeds that his new Ostpolitik had sown had sprouted and borne fruit. Being able to witness this filled Brandt with joy and satisfaction. It is obvious to ask what connections Willy Brandt had with the country in which the traveling exhibition will be shown. Answers to this question can be found in an 11th board, directly related to the host country, which shows the political and personal relations he had with the state, its political leadership, and its society. In order to address the local audience in the best possible way, we have also decided to produce the exhibition in the predominant language of the country. We look forward to showing the international touring exhibition in many countries in the coming years. The first stops before the end of this year, 2020, will be Moscow and Warsaw, the capitals where the most important treaties with the East were signed exactly 50 years ago. In 2021, Wrocław, Seoul and Oslo will follow as further exhibition venues. I hope that I have been able to arouse your curiosity about our international traveling exhibition on Willy Brandt. You can find more information, especially about the tour locations, on the website of our foundation. We look forward to your visit. Thank you very much for your attention and goodbye.